Welcome back to session 2. I now have the distinct honor and pleasure of introducing our illustrious guest of honor today, Mr. Siddharth Varadarajan. Mr. Siddharth Varadarajan is a well-known luminary in the field of journalism. Mr. Varadarajan has graduated from the London School of Economics and from the University of Columbia here in the United States. After pursuing his career in the two continents of Europe and the US for a while, he went back to India into the field of journalism, his beloved field from the beginning. And having worked for some time in the Times of India, he then went on to take on a prestigious role as the chief editor of The Hindu, which, as all of you know, has had a great history of presenting an independent voice and representing people's perspective. But over time, I think, as most established media channels have been doing, and I think Naseem alluded to that before, there have been pressures, and and I'm very proud to have had acquaintance with Mr. Varadarajan, because he's been a rare beacon of independence, and he's going to talk a little bit about his experience in that process. But coming out of that, he is, along with a couple of his friends, he started what started as a very small alternate media venture, and which has now grown to be the preeminent platform for progressive content in India, that is The Wire. And he has touched on pretty much every topic that you can think of, from nuclear technology to pandemics and the effect of many of the things that we're talking about, public health issues and so on. And of course, he's had his share of controversy in this process, and he's built a reputation of somebody who cannot be bent to the wills of the powerful. And he's kind of an inspiration for a lot of us in terms of what we can do in the face of the adversity from powerful vested interests. In his career, he's gotten awards and accolades that are far too many for me to count. Just to name a few, every organization from the United Nations to the Deutsche Welle, the Ramnath Goenka Foundation. So we are really happy to have him in the midst of us. And today, Mr. Varadarajan is going to talk to us on the theme for the evening, which is the role of alternate media in amplifying voices that are ignored by traditional media. And who better to talk on this topic than the person who's kind of led most of that, amplification of the voices of the unheard in India. So with that, rather than spend more time on giving the introduction, I would rather have Mr. Varadarajan talk to us. His speech is a better introduction than what I can give. So with that, Mr. Varadarajan, over to you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Uday Bhaskar Garu. Thank you, core members and organizers and supporters of the foundation, the Southgate Foundation. I congratulate you on the initiative and work that you have undertaken. I was once a graduate student in the United States, in New York, and we also, me and my fellow students at Columbia, NYU, and elsewhere, did our bit to organize events in the Indian community in the hope of fostering a culture of progressive thinking and democratic conversations, and we achieved a certain measure of success. And I'm very happy and glad to see these kinds of initiatives thriving in this day and age, and in a place like Texas. This is very heartening indeed. So thank you very much for the work you do and for having me here. Any conversation about the state of the Indian media, mainstream or big media on the one hand, and independent or so-called alternative media on the other, has to begin by situating the media environment in in the current political context. And all of you who follow events in India perhaps already are aware of this, you know this, but it's important to emphasize that the India as it exists today, what Mr. Modi calls the New India, Naya Bharat, essentially is an India that is increasingly becoming authoritarian, that is increasingly being divided within on religious lines, because that is what the political leadership of the country is willing and wants to do. So this polarization is being willed from the highest levels. Authoritarianism is being pushed consciously, undermining democratic institutions, undermining the rights of people, undermining, I would say, the rights of states in what is, after all, a federal polity. And what ties this agenda of growing authoritarianism and growing communalism is a certain approach to political economy in which the government believes that its goal is to enrich the biggest corporations, the most wealthy people, at the expense of the broad masses. This is also part of today's reality. This is a part of what New India or Naya Bharat means. Also, a central feature of this Naya Bharat, this authoritarian, increasingly, communal polarization-driven, crony capitalism-driven Naya Bharat, is a cult of personality around the leader. Never before, perhaps in the last 75 years, since India's independence, has one seen such a cult of personality around the Prime Minister, to the extent to which hardly, ministers, when they speak in Parliament. Today I was listening to a question that one MP asked of the Defence Ministry. And the minister prefaced, whenever he was speaking about, whenever he was trying to give an answer and say that we've done something positive, they always have to begin by saying, inspired by the leadership of Narendra Modi ji. It's impossible for any leader, BJP leader, minister, chief minister, to speak in any other way. And this is only one manifestation of this cult of personality. There are lots of other examples, manifestations that one can cite. So the cult of personality is also central to what is happening in India today. When you take these four elements, you can imagine that the greatest amount of pressure is being brought to bear on the democratic rights and civil liberties of ordinary people. I'm in the media. Press freedom matters to me. The violation of press freedom, violation of media freedom affects me directly. But the reason we raise this issue in public and the reason why we talk about it is not because we are in some sense an aggrieved party. Actually, when a government targets the media, what they are doing is targeting ordinary citizens. They're targeting ordinary voters. They're targeting people at large, because in any democratic society, the link between the electoral process, where people get to pick their rulers once every 4 or 5 years, the link between that process and accountability is the media. Very true. It's not enough to say that you have elected somebody today Now you go home, sit quiet, and let that person do whatever they want to for the next 4 or 5 years. That's not what democracy is. Democracy is about holding elected officials, elected representatives accountable on a daily basis. And this accountability can only happen if the public is well informed about what the government is doing, if the public is well informed about what is happening in the country, if the public gets to read or watch news which highlights problems across the country, so that they can then demand that some kind of solution or action be taken to solve those problems. That can only exist if the ordinary citizen is able to have questions put to the government on an almost daily basis. So the channel for ensuring accountability in democratic societies is to have the media report fearlessly, independently about what's happening, and to put questions to the government, seek accountability on behalf of the people as a whole. This is the role of the media. And that's why democratic constitutions regard press freedom as a fundamental right. In America, freedom of speech, freedom of the press, these are all part of the Bill of Rights that we heard about in Session 1. In India, Article 19 of the Constitution guarantees freedom of speech. Freedom of press is not mentioned explicitly, but courts have, it's clear that courts have interpreted freedom of press to derive from freedom of speech. I would say it also derives from the citizen's right to information, which is another fundamental right. And this freedom is subject only to very specific restrictions that are mentioned in the Constitution. Defamation, incitement of offences, and we can all agree that these are reasonable restrictions, provided they are adjudicated not by the executive but by the judiciary. This is the constitutional framework that the founding fathers and mothers of India, when they drafted the Constitution, came up with. And the expectation was that India would be a vibrant democracy because it would have a free and fair press, a feisty press. Frankly speaking, I don't think the Indian media fully rose up to the occasion in the 50s and 60s. If you go back and look at the newspapers of the time, you will get many examples of the media behaving like a mouthpiece of the government. At some crucial moments, yes, they did push the government. They highlighted problems that forced the government to act. The power of the press was such that in Indira Gandhi's time, when she declared the emergency in 1975, she insisted on censorship. After the emergency was lifted, the Indian media took it upon itself to never allow this kind of situation to arise again, and has been very fierce in defending its freedom. There were times in the past when attempts were made to throttle media freedom. Rajiv Gandhi, for example, wanted to introduce a draconian defamation bill which the media opposed. And I would say, by and large, the media has conducted itself with a high degree of independence for much of India's history. And no greater proof of this exists than if you were to go back and look at Indian media coverage in 2011, 2012, the last 2-3 years of the Manmohan Singh government, when the newspapers and TV channels were full of reports which basically highlighted shortcomings of the government. So there was the 2G scam, there was the CWG scam, there was the Nirbhaya case. There was this whole phrase that was popularized that Manmohan Singh runs a directionless government, the government is in drift, Manmohan Singh is silent. He never speaks about anything. And there was an atmosphere created by the media, which I think played a central role in turning public opinion against the UPA government and Manmohan Singh. I'm not commenting on whether that was right or wrong. This is a fact. Now you come from 2014 onwards and say, what is the role of the media? When the Department of Justice and the SEC in New York published their indictments of Gautam Adani and other Adani executives for violating the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act in India. And the allegation was that they had attempted to bribe public officials in order to get certain solar energy contracts. Again, I'm not going to the rights or wrongs of this, whether these allegations are correct, whether they're proven, unproven, whatever. But this threw up an important challenge. This indictment threw up an important challenge for India as a democratic country, as a country governed by rule of law. Here you have a businessman whom everybody knows is a close ally of the Prime Minister. If India was true to its democratic, constitution, if there was rule of law, the proximity of a businessman to the Prime Minister should not have mattered. The first response of the government of India should have been to contact the United States and say, do you have any more information that you can share with us so that we can investigate this offense of attempted bribery of an Indian public official in India? You would expect that the government would be agitated. The same government which talks of foreign hand and so on and so forth. Here you have a foreign government telling you that we have evidence that a leading businessman has tried to bribe public officials. Shouldn't you want to find out who these public officials are, who are going to be bribed, and investigate them? The Modi government could shut down a website called NewsClick and arrest the founder of NewsClick, Prabir Purkayastha, under the anti-terrorism law, simply because a New York Times article mentioned that one of the people who had invested in Prabir Purkayastha's company was an American citizen who was pro-Chinese. Simply on the basis of one line in a New York Times story, you order an investigation that leads to the arrest of Prabir Purkayastha under the Terrorism Act. You virtually shut down NewsClick, and you compare that action to the action taken or not taken in the case of Gautam Adani and the allegation filed by the Department of Justice. So, we're talking about the media here. You would have thought that this is a very juicy topic. To have discussions every night on TV of the kind that we saw in 2013 and 2014 on the CWG and 2G and all of those scams. But nothing. There were no angry debates, there were no angry discussions. There was no concern about the rule of law and corruption and so on and so forth. The same people who railed about corruption barely 10 years ago are not bothered by it anymore. So this transformation of the Indian media into a supine, servile creature that essentially is doing the government's bidding, that will not ask difficult questions, is something which has really served to undermine India's democracy. It has helped the government in all of its authoritarian impulses. It has served as a handmaiden or an accomplice. When the central government, when the union government misuses the law to target human rights defenders, 15 or 16 of India's finest human rights defenders lawyers, social activists, labor activists have been falsely arrested and imprisoned under the so-called Bhima Koregaon case. They've been in jail for 6 or 7 years, no trial is in sight. And this media is very happy to amplify all kinds of false charges against these human rights defenders. When journalist Siddiq Kappan was arrested on his way to reporting what was happening in Hathras, the gang rape and murder of a young Dalit woman, he was arrested by the Uttar Pradesh police and charged with terrorism. You would have thought that the media would at least wake up and say, this is harassment of a journalist. This is the unfair targeting of a journalist. But a big section of the media, what Ravish Kumar calls Godi media, became a conduit for all kinds of false information being peddled by the government. So some money that is sent by Siddiq Kappan's brother from Dubai through a bank, small amount of money, I think it was meant for the medical treatment of somebody. This gets reported in some of these channels as mysterious money trail of Siddiq Kappan traced. So you incite public opinion against a fellow journalist. And Siddiq Kappan is not the only journalist against whom cases were filed. And reporters in Kashmir have been imprisoned under the anti-terrorism law. Cases have been filed against, at one point we counted nearly 80 or 90 journalists against whom all kinds of frivolous criminal cases were filed. There was one reporter in Uttar Pradesh who reported, and since we're talking about the concerns of the marginalized, he reported on how midday meals in one school in Uttar Pradesh consisted of roti and namak. And the district administration and the police arrested him for filing such a report. And we have many such cases. Of course, these cases are in dozens, maybe 100 plus, not thousands, not hundreds of thousands. But the point is that each arrest serves to intimidate and send a warning to thousands of other journalists. So, if you're a freelance reporter working in Uttar Pradesh or Madhya Pradesh, and you come across a story that the authorities may not like, the whole idea is to make you think 100 times. Should I write the story or not? If I write the story, will a case be filed against me? Will I be arrested? Will I get bail? So you introduce this element of fear and doubt in people's minds. What Idi Amin used to say in Uganda, that yes, in Uganda, freedom of speech is guaranteed, but freedom after speech is not guaranteed. So, freedom of press guaranteed. Once you publish though, all bets are off. Kuch bhi ho sakta hai. So you plant that element of doubt in people's minds. Not only do you plant that element of doubt in the minds of reporters or editors, in this digital era, see, journalism circulates through virality. People share stories on social media. So they will occasionally file a case or arrest somebody for having tweeted a story, for having liked a certain story on Facebook, for having shared something on WhatsApp. So you create this fear psychosis, not just in the reporter, but in the common reader too, to ensure that narratives or stories which go against the grain, which go against what the government likes, will not circulate as widely as they ought to. I don't know how many of you are aware, but during the farmers' protest in India, there was one section of the media, the big media, which And this is a protest which has to do with the economic rights of millions of people. When Modi was introducing these new farm laws to benefit Adanis and Ambanis, the farmers said, no, we don't want this. And under India's democracy, they staged a democratic protest. They tried to march to Delhi, as is their right, and the government did its best to stop them. The big media channels, first they tried to slander and malign the farmers, that they are extremists, they are separatists, they are Khalistanis. When the farmers rejected these accusations, and then they saw that these TV channels are not reporting properly, they started to shoot their own videos. And they created their own Twitter handles and they began to post their own information on Twitter. So the Information and Broadcasting Ministry told Twitter that you better delete all these handles. So hundreds and hundreds of Twitter handles and Twitter posts by farmers about their protest. When in other words, the marginalized, not only does the media, big media, not speak for them, when they try to speak for themselves, the government does its best to silence them. And those of us in the independent media that report about it then are subjected also to all kinds of pressure. I gave you the extreme example of what happened in NewsClick. But many media platforms across the country face pressure of one kind or the other. There's threat of cases, defamation cases, criminal cases against individual reporters. Over the last 2 or 3 years, the government has tried to create a new form of oppression, which is that they published a new set of rules, the IT rules, under which they created a fact-checking unit. And what the government wanted to do was to say that this fact-checking unit, which is an official government body, if the fact-checking unit decides that a certain news is fake, then that news item has to be deleted by social media. So you can imagine what kind of unconstitutional power this is. That tomorrow the Wire writes a story. For example, during the Kumbh Mela, there was a story that the Central Pollution Control Board gave a report to the government that the fecal content in the water where lakhs of devotees were being asked to come and bathe was well above the safe level. The government said, no, this is not true. The Chief Minister went and bathed in the Ganga to convince everybody it was fine. But the CPCB data was clear. If that fact-checking unit had not been declared unconstitutional by the Bombay High Court and put a stay on, if a stay had not been put on it, maybe the government would have said, no, this is fake news. You can't publish it. Of course, since that remedy is not possible anymore because of the stay, they did the next best thing, which is that they got the CPCB to produce a new report, which came out the other day, saying that actually that earlier report was wrong and that because of variation in data, and now if we take the mean level of the data, everything is fine. So, this is the way in which the rights of people, like this is a government that claims to speak about importance of Hindu religion and respect for Hindu traditions, and it doesn't mind subjecting Hindu pilgrims, lakhs and millions of Hindu pilgrims, to the most unsanitary conditions possible. If the government was really concerned, it could have spent enough money to ensure that the place was neat, clean, and the water quality level was maintained throughout, but it didn't do that. And of course, you have a whole section of media which is busy promoting what the government wants, while that section of the media which is critical is silent. So I'll end with the just last point that, you see, in 2018, the government formed a group of ministers, which was tasked, it was called the Group of Ministers on Communication. And the problem that this GOM was addressing was that we have control and we are able to manage the television and print media very well. But the narrative on digital media is something that we are not able to control. And so they were trying to come up with some solutions, some remedies. They haven't fully succeeded. I would say they haven't succeeded at all, actually. Because if you look at the 2024, thank you, if you look at the 2024 election, despite the full money power, despite misusing the Enforcement Directorate and CBI against the opposition, despite misusing the government machinery in 101 ways, despite their control over TV and newspapers, despite the Prime Minister himself making more than 100 communal speeches, the number of seats of the ruling party fell from 303 to 240. And the reason that happened was because this Janta of India, the marginalized majority of Indians, from whom every attempt was made to hide the truth, were able to see what was happening and understand what was happening thanks to the efforts of independent media, independent journalists. And I have to say, this is not just Wire. I mean, Wire is one of many. There is we are part of something called the DigiPub Foundation. There are nearly 100 members, different digital platforms in different languages that are doing great work. You have YouTubers who are putting out videos which get millions of views. And all of this had an impact on the way the public approached, understood what was happening in the country. So I would say that the 24 election results showed what the impact of independent media can be. Of course, one response that the government is now planning is to create a new law called the Digital Services Broadcast Bill, Digital Broadcasters Service Bill, where they want every YouTube video provider who is, or every YouTuber who has current affairs content to enroll and register with the government, abide by some kind of a program code, and then be held accountable by the government for any supposed violations of this program code. So the whole idea is to control YouTube and make sure that what happened in 2024, like I would say, what happened in 2024 is a lesson to people like us to work even harder so that the message of what is happening in the country reaches people and people are able to understand. But from the government's point of view, for them the conclusion was do what you can to make sure digital media does not grow, in fact is weakened. And I'm here to tell you that me and my colleagues who are part of the digital media landscape in India intend to stand our ground. And in order to do so, we rely on the support of people like you. Of course, the Wire is non-profit, so only Indian citizens can donate money, but everybody can read. And I urge everybody in this room to regularly read the Wire, share our stories, circulate them to your friends and family. Those of you who are Indian citizens, we would very much welcome you to donate. We have a paid newsletter called the India Cable, which everybody, Indian or US citizen, is free to subscribe to. And there may be other media platforms that you like. So find ways to support and share, because it's only when the work that we do reaches more and more people in different languages. I'm very, for us, the fact that we started the Wire Telugu in January this year is a very, very important milestone. Earlier we had, until now it's English, Hindi and Urdu. But to add a major language like Telugu, spoken by millions and millions of people, one of the most populous, one of the largest spoken languages in India. And we hope that having succeeded with launching Wire Telugu, we can now proceed with other languages, find a way to have in Tamil, in Punjabi, in Bengali and Gujarati and so on. But the idea should be to reach the maximum number of people. And I think the initiatives that you are doing here with the Indian community abroad, I think is something which can definitely be of great help to us. So we are very happy, and I'm very thrilled to be here today. And thank you very much for patiently listening to me, even though it's very late at night. Thank you.
Thank you. Big hand. That was a very, very inspirational speech. what Mr. Varadarajan left unsaid in this is many of the anecdotes that he was talking about, the harassment of press, were actually first-person accounts. Mr. Varadarajan himself was target of many such pressure tactics, including FIRs being filed against him for a tweet that he sent out somewhere. So I think it's a mark of his greatness that he's not actually touting that, but many of the accounts that he said were actually first-person accounts. And we thank you, sir.
Thank you.
And we really feel honored that you were here and you shared your perspective with us. And we do look forward to working with you.
Thank you.
Thank you.